Thank you. How are you doing? Good morning. As they introduced me, I'm Pablo Lopez, and the second head of the second or the deputy head of this crypto center. I would like to thank Steven for their kind invitation. We will focus now on cyber threats. Generally speaking, the information that we will be given is what we said already. Information you can find on the internet. There will be nothing new. But what's new about it is that it is experience-based. We will not share anything that is not on the internet. But you see that we are suffering ourselves what I would say is cyber threats. So let me introduce ourselves. We are the National Crypto Center. We are part of the intelligence system in Spain, and we have some functions and roles. So there are royal decrees and standards. That means that we are in charge of some items. For example, everything having to do with ICT security. And since 2010, we are a governmental CERT, a CERT, according to the security system, regulating non-sensitive information in the public sector, how it has to be guarded, treated, handled, managed. So it sets out a series of requirements, security requirements, so that the information security is as high as possible. The idea is that if the administration, the public sector correctly handles our information, the citizen will be much safer, much more secure, because the interaction with the administration will be much more convenient, will be appropriate. These are the challenges and the missions that we have. Our main role is to provide services. We have this service calling. We are here to serve the public sphere in so much as we can. That's the summary of the whole presentation. And we work as a community because we've realized that by fighting this threat, the only way to counteract it is with a response as a group. As individuals, we cannot get anywhere. To some extent, our efficiency or added value is always related to the way we can exchange sensitive information on cyber threats with other experts in our sector or environment context. Here are some figures. 14th of December, it will be our 10th edition of our meeting. We've been working for so many years now as incident management and as focusing or targeting some specific resources. We've been working on it for 10 years now. And in 2010, there was a framework. In a nutshell, so it's 10 years long experience. We've learned, we've understood what we are up against, and we're fighting this threat, which is not a simple task at all. We try to get the necessary resources to counteract it. Here just have some figures to understand what we are and what we do. And now focusing on the presentation itself, here it is. We see that this is a new paradigm in the world. If we follow this present flowchart or presentation, this is stats for this year, and we see that almost 30% world population, best case scenario, so Western society, around 50% there, that would be the average, needs or uses social media, meaning that we need it, that the paradigms change. It's not a means, it's a need. It's not a secondary service, but we are dependent. So dependence has changed. We also come to see that technology depends on the internet as well, and it is quite clear. All attacks now, same as last year with the Mirai attack. The IoT devices will be using interconnection more and more often. So technology means that they are to be fully connected and connected to the rest of the world. So on the one hand, we see that people need to relate to each other, and we've seen that for quite a large amount of the population, and the same happens with technology. And then we have that person, the person itself. We've always thought that if I am on the internet, if I'm browsing, since I'm a regular person, just looking for, I don't know, my bank, my news. So significant things, so I'm no target. So that paradigm's change as well. Just being on the internet means that we are a target. If you're not paying for something, you are the product. It's just the same as before. Who's gonna love me? It's just the same. No one loves me. I cannot believe I am given this for free. So this is more or less the same. If I'm on the internet, just because of the fact that I'm on the internet, it comes at a cost. It is my behavior, my trends, that's handled, that's managed. It has a value. Google, Facebook, WhatsApp. So it is not the information itself, but everything setting up behavioral patterns that has its own weight. And finally, technologies. No matter how much we want technology to be safe and secure and quality and audits, in the end there will always be bugs in technology. There will always be some weaknesses. In this case around, well, maybe these statistics are not so accurate, because I guess that the increase in 2015 was because hacking team back then revealed all these zero-day vulnerabilities, so that increased, if not exponentially, but at least a lot, the vulnerabilities that we knew about. There are vulnerabilities that people know and exploit, which means that in the end, the internet is what we said, a growing culture for what? For a threat for those agents. And why is that? Because they want to exfilter information, recruitment, propaganda, damaging nation states, getting a privileged knowledge, making profit out of a transaction, cybercrime as a service. So on the one hand, we have a society that is depending on technologies, and then on the other hand, that person that is on the internet, it has a value already, and technologies need to connect, and technologies that have vulnerabilities. So that summarizes the scheme, the graph. It's a growing culture for people to use it to make and cause damage to their own profit, whatever that is. It affects administration and public sector becoming the target to this attack. So what worries us is, because we work in the public sector, and we try to make sure that it's as secure as possible, because if the administration is not secure, the citizen will not be either. And that's sensitizing society, and that's what we're doing. And we've been working on it for long. We've seen these threats, these attacks that do harm. And the target, it's there, public sector, which usually will be represented by states. And why is that? Basically because the states are the only ones that can afford it. Afford having people, money, resources in the end for these attacks, creating these infrastructures, producing this kind of software, developing their own tools, keeping the infrastructures, etc. So only a few can afford it. Those organizations that have plenty of resources. In summary, these are the stats for this week. And there you see the number of incidents. So 2016, so far, 19,000, more than 19,000 incidents managed. And that's what we see. And let me tell you something. When we say over 19,000 incidents, that it's 1,000 more than last year, does not mean that our worse quality, just the opposite. We have more incidents and are of a greater quality. When I say so, is because the standards we follow with our probes and IDS, we filter, we control them, we improve them, we try to reduce false positives. So even if we're still learning and improving our detection capability that is based on our big data intelligence and the way we handle all this information, which is sensitive, we said, still it grows. So the problem is there. That's what this slide is for, to explain that the threat is growing up, that it's 19,000 now, and out of those, high and critical would be 600, and critical 43. Critical 43 means cyber espionage. So there is a state, and there's proof, evidence that there's been exfiltration from our bodies, whatever these are. That's what we've seen. But there might be things that we do not realize, of course. but at least we understand what we are up against. So cyber threats happen and targets our organizations. 10% others, that's what we always say. We have our early warning systems, and when we say 10% other systems, we mean information we exchange with other bodies. So other environment services and security bodies, etc. So working alone is not possible, especially for cyber threats. We need to change and exchange information. Here we see so many incidents happen, but what's the percentage that we care for? Harmful code is 54%, intrusions over 35% out of 19,000 cases. So we need to understand that it's not just Spain. Sorry, this is not only spam, but it's also exfiltrating or other purposes. So, who are the players? Who are the agents? We are not making them up. Criminal organizations. Cybercrime as a service is being implemented so promptly and fast. And why is that? Because they bring us heavy benefits, heavy profits. They make profit, so it makes sense. We will see that the black market, we can go onto Tor and other portals where you get anything you want. You just go up there, identify yourself, pay with bitcoins that can be 400, 300 euro. In exchange, we know that the rate changes, and you can find tools quite simple with a very user-friendly dashboard that anyone can use so easily for an attack or for crashing any server. And then states is what concerns us the most, because that's what the ones that can play, the ones that have the resources that are at a high level to compete. Cyber threats, how do they work? They have a life cycle. Let's focus on what cyber threats need to attack any kind of system. They need infrastructure, they need some tools, they need an infection vector. I'll insist on that, because you have tools, infrastructures, malware, but if you do not have an infection vector that is the right one, you will never reach out to the system or the user. You can try and fish, but no one will bait. And then we need communications to spread it through the system, to exfiltrate information, and what matters most is the capability to be persistent, to colonize, to stay and settle down. There's loaned or own infrastructure. Ideally, you should have your own VPS and manage it. That was at the beginning. Now it's changed because detection capability has changed. So what the threat tries to do is to stay unnoticed by using borrowed infrastructures, using the vulnerabilities from those infrastructures. So current tendency would be using an infrastructure that helps us have an attack that is based on vulnerabilities of websites, basically, to use it for my own profit. They can be legit, non-legit, for CNC services, or just for an attack, but that's the trend. Use the infrastructure that is existing, use its vulnerabilities to place my own code, software, and web shell, and from there onwards, we can use a CC dashboard and take some leaps so that I can anonymize the infrastructure, my attack capability, because we will see one of the basic characteristics or features of cyber threat is how difficult it is to have attribution. There are services, there are people indicating who the agent might be, but it's difficult to have the attribution for the perpetrator. It's only clues, it's only hints, real evidence. That's very difficult. We will never have them because they will always use mechanisms that allow them to anonymize communication and stay unnoticed, as we said. So finding evidence will always be based on an understanding that this has been written in a given language, the time where the code was produced, maybe working hours from a given time area. So if this is a kind of a project that has to do, I don't know, with a sheep or a railway, I will know who would be interested in the topic, and so the hints will lead me there. So the attribution will always be based on a series of analysis and studies and intelligence that you need for the attribution, but evidence per se, it'll be difficult to find. Tools that we can have.
Why do we want to develop these tools? Well, if I can use a borrowed infrastructure, if I can use an off-the-shelf malware, and if that malware is good for me because my victim does not implement any security measures, well, I will just use that. For instance, the Chinese threat is quite smart in that regard, meaning that they are aligned with the threat, meaning that if the the victim has no safeguards, they just use like simple tools. The moment they find more barriers at the other end, they just make the means to carry out the attack. They make them more sophisticated. So therefore, what I mean is that they adapt their tools, their weapons to the victim. So in any attack, the prior study is carried out. So everyone connects to the social media, then they check the information that this person displays on the social media. So 30% of the people need to expose themselves to come out to the world. So therefore, that exposition is often used to analyze attack vectors and then to design an attack that is to customize an attack for that victim. So there are two typical infection vectors. One is the spear phishing, which is targeted attack, that is to say an email targeted at the person, then the person has been looked into, we know the hobbies of that person, whether this person has just bought a car, a bike. So we have lots of information that help us send out an email, and so that this person believes that the email is legit, that is to say a trustworthy one. So therefore, that email, put it that it is in perfect English, perfect Spanish, perfect syntax. Well, even if that is not that perfect in terms of the language, it should be trusted, a trusted one. Therefore, for that, as I say, well, a prior analysis or research of the victim takes place before the attack is committed. And then, what do they look for? Well, they just want that email to be trusted by the victim. And at the end, they said, well, do not open that PDF, do not click on that link. But at the end of the day, threats could come from anywhere. When you open up, you open an email, so you may download the link through a PDF, a macro, Excel, or a PowerPoint. So this is an example of an APT, for instance, HD Cry over America. So it did everything on the left, and here we see on the left all the right countries that have been impacted. Infection vector, an email with a PowerPoint attached. And that PowerPoint had images adapted to the profile of the victim. So every time the PowerPoint was run, it unzipped, well, it had an unusual size. It unzipped a code developed in Python, as far as I can remember, and that generated, well, did an unzip, and then the bug took the credentials from stole the credentials for the victims. So these were the images, and were on the PowerPoints, and in the end it decompressed, it unzipped the software, a software that was and it's downloaded and installed. So another thing which is trendy now, and actually this is the watering hole. It is very much in line with the previous one. So that is to say, to use a legit website. We all use a portal. A portal helps us get whatever we want to get. So that portal, through that portal, the malware code is executed, and that malicious code allow us to download that watering or web exploit, a web exploit. So you just log into a trusted website, whether it is a newspaper or a portal, something that you use frequently, that will study our browser, our plugins, our extensions, and it will determine whether they are vulnerable or not. If they are vulnerable, it will interact with that browser so that it will download a software that will in itself download and execute a malicious software. So this is the trend, building trust, passing unnoticed. That's a good way to introduce a exploit to determine the vulnerabilities of the users, and then they use one vulnerability exploit after another. So we call it watering hole because everyone ends up getting there. Exploit kit, finds out about my problem, vulnerabilities, and some extensions are not updated. Typical Flash, typical Java. It determines the profile of the user, takes a look or finds out about vulnerabilities and takes it from there and starts taking action. So this is the most complicated thing. I may have infrastructure of tools, but what is most important is to make it to the system. And here these are the infection vectors. This is the first thing that we need to counteract. And then next, what happens is the usual thing. First of all, internal communication through lateral movements for me to spread throughout the system and to get to know the system. Well, remember that these cyber threats are not in a rush whatsoever. They just want to have a deep, good understanding of the system before they take action. So lateral movements in internal communication, and then outer or external communication through exfiltration. Internal communication, accessing to internal resources, getting credentials, allowing the malicious code to propagate itself, to widespread itself. So whether there is a Debian, Apache, what is the operating system, so different versions. That is to say, to have a good understanding of the system. I am getting to know the system so that I can just introduce the malware code adapted to that victim, and the same goes for exfiltration. Once I am in the system, I gather that information and I use it to my benefit, for my benefit. Could be any information, or for instance, I may use ransomware to hijack the system. At the end of the day, it's about growing and doing something which is not legit in a system. And when we're talking about external communication, we're talking about data exfiltration. That can be done in different ways. There is a most advanced way to do it. That is to say, being unnoticed on the internet. Which is the best way to do it? Well, we see it here on the screen. Social media. Most of data infiltration that we are seeing is done through Twitter channels or through the cloud. That is to say, the typical providers, Google, Dropbox. We are talking about services and protocols that are common, that are shared, and where there will be no prevention there. There will be no security measures there. And then persistence and widespreading or colonization. So this is what we see in serious APTs. That is to say, the capacity not only to make it there, but to stay. And therefore, persistence mechanisms are used. First of all, it passes unnoticed, and then it limits the systems and security systems and services of the system by taking them down or continue to be passed unnoticed, so that the code is not easy to de-obfuscate, and so that they find how that code has been generated or how that code what is the procedure that the code follows? Okay, they do all that just to prevent from being detected or noticed. So all in all, everything that I have just said is represented in this diagram. So this is infrastructure. We will have an attacker with infrastructure. We use an infection system, a spam phishing, watering hole, either of the two or both simultaneously. In the end, the victim will just fall into the trap, and then the victim will download malware software and looking for backdoors to access the system. It will also find out information about the vulnerabilities of the system to take it from there and then to implement privileges and to widespread itself through lateral movement. Lateral movements are very, very useful because they allow colonization of the system. So if you cannot really take care security, it's very difficult to provide security all over the system. So that's what they do. They take advantage of that and they colonize the system. It propagates itself. Then number of utilities are installed. This is the rootkit. So that the tool that generates encrypted behavior where information is stored, difficult to detect. Then the data is exfiltrated in different packages so that it is not detected by the proxy. So this is a detailed study, detailed research, so that they take their time with the one and only objective not to be eventually detected. They just want to stay in the system and to have free full control of it. So data exfiltration, everything has been colonized, and then once the system is colonized, well, we don't know what happens, and then they are highly perseverant. So, well, they have the threat, and then if we detect it, we may clean the system, take a number of countermeasures. In a week or in a month, they are back again. Another wave and another wave. They are never happy. They persist, they insist, and they adapt to the means, to the environment. If you close a door for them today, short time later they come back. So this is what we what this presentation is intended at, that, and letting you know what we see and frequently, very frequently. So intrusion takes place well, in hours or days. However, in terms of detecting it might take us years, and reacting or responding to it might take us months. And that is also having an impact on cybersecurity, meaning that the paradigm was changing. So many years ago, we said that all the services were being protected, that we had to protect all the systems. We didn't want the system to have vulnerabilities. It was always no, no, no. But now Dr. No is part of the past. If you cannot work before your computer, we have a problem. The paradigm has changed. Now the paradigm is one of resilience. We want the system to run well, to have a number of security measures implemented, and to continue working once we are impacted, so that our reactive capacity is timely. It is as fast as possible. We have to be aware. We want to be aware that I'm being infected, but I want to have that detection capacity and to respond as fast as possible. So that's the paradigm. That's what we talk about: incident management, incident response. We have to take preventative measures, so therefore security measures and have to be adapted to the functionality of the system. If the person cannot continue working, we have to soften the security system. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense. And I do want to invest resources in detection capacity and resilience capacity. Resilience capacity meaning going back to normal as soon as possible, to restore and to recover as soon as possible. And then changing the mindset of people and of people in charge of security. So threats should always be there, will always be there. So protection is insufficient. That's the main problem that we have. And also very, very important, what it says here last, attribution, which is very, very difficult. Also to be taken into account, the exposure surface will continue to grow. Now we bring our own device to our companies, we use social media, so we are using a wide range of devices, so therefore our exposure is growing and growing. So therefore, for that we need new paradigms. The idea is not to limit all these services and all the resources, because if we do that, we will no longer be that efficient. We have to shift to resilience, that is to say, working and fostering detection capacity as well as response capacity. What have we learned from APTs? Well, this is clearly explained here. They know much more than we know. They are many more than we are. They devote more resources than we devote to it, and they never take a break. They insist a lot, because they come back because they found another backdoor, another vulnerability. You clean your system, and then they change the Excel macro, they generate a different email, whatever, you name it. They send you an email about a meeting here or there, or they just send you hot news. So they never take a break, and they are extremely highly specialized. So that means that we are facing a very difficult enemy. So we cannot do it alone. We cannot work alone. We have to work hand in hand. We have to bring efforts. We have to combine our efforts to fight this huge threat. So this is an example of our own experience. This is what we have faced. This is what we have found. Threats from Russia, from China, and this is what we did to respond to it. This is how we reacted. This is for you to know that cyber threats exist. This is not science fiction anymore. We try to face them, to handle them as best as possible. So we are learning every day. We are allocating increasing number of resources, and well, our enemy is a big enemy. And we are all the time learning and learning and learning, and sharing and sharing and sharing. If we do not share, we will get nowhere. So characteristics, general background of APT. So well, often targeted at companies, states, industries, public and private sector. It has a number of political, economic, and social advantages. And well, these are two main examples of threats of APT from Russia, from China. We know them very well. Well, of course, there are also other countries, not only China and Russia, because all countries nowadays have offensive capacities. And if some countries do not have offensive capacities yet, they are acquiring them, or they will acquire them in the future. Threats are there and will continue to be there. People will have more and more capacities, because we are moving in a different paradigm and different cyberspace, and in a different cyber world. This is, in the last year, we've seen a decrease of Chinese campaigns. I cannot remember very well, but I think it says early 2015, we talked about between 60 and 70 simultaneous campaigns. That number has decreased, especially last year. We don't know whether some non-aggression agreements were signed, or because they were just reorganizing themselves. We don't know whether this is happening because they are becoming less efficient. We just don't think so. Well, perhaps there is a higher level of security. So there has been a turning point. We have witnessed that. Or, well, it could be that they have advanced so much that we do not have any detection capabilities. Well, but anyway, that insistence, okay, they are not that insistent anymore. So now they are just limited they just limit their attacks to the just about attacks. So this is an Iranian attack or threat as well. Also North Korea. We also saw what happened to the attacks to Sony. Threats are there, and they will continue to move forward, because we are talking about actors with high resources, or significant resources, and Lazarus, another emerging threat, comes from India. We sometimes we use the Mandian nomenclature. So we use panda bears for Chinese threats, and we use the elephants for the Indian threat. So these are just examples, and we have seen it will not stop there. This will continue to grow. What have we seen in the news? RSC hacking team. This is a company that sold services and tools. That was back in 2015. This year, we saw Equation Group. That is to say, tools with the capacity to act on network infrastructures and to infect hard disks, etc. Then, now focusing on what is most important, which is cybercrime, we have the very well-known Carvanac. Carvanac is used because it is very, very profitable. So $1,000 million were stolen through an APT. They got into a bank. They selected the users, a number of users. They stole the credentials, and in the end, they ended up making transactions on behalf of the administrators. So in this case, they did not exfiltrate any data. They just stole $1 billion. And also, when attempts to hack the banking system, here we can see in 2016, 35 attempts. Out of those transactions, 30 of them were blocked, 1 of them failed, 4 of them succeeded, and they stole $81 billion. So crime is profitable. Crime is profitable. That's why they devote time and resources to it. What we said before, yes, the internet portals out there, you can buy a tool, not only a tool, you can also buy a hacked server with your control and command. So it is kind of a turnkey product that you buy. So here we see the renewal of servers, here in bottom graph. So this is the amount of servers that they offer you, and then in red, the capacity to renew them. They renew them on a daily, monthly. Some 80,000 servers that are vulnerable. They give you all the whatever you need to access them, command and control. This is the typical dashboard for this type of services. You can log in and then use it to your advantage. Well, this has been quite general so far. Perhaps I didn't tell you new information, but I have to tell you that we are seeing it. We are seeing it. We are detecting it. We see Covenant, and we have that experience. That experience help us learn from them, and little by little, we are implementing countermeasures and treating threats as best as possible so that we can minimize harm and damage. That's our vocation. That's our mission. We want to mitigate threats as much as possible, as best as possible. Trends. Well, the panorama, the outlook will not change very much. I would say that it will get worse. This is a slide about cyber jihadism. Apparently, this is trendy. And here we also have some trading in terms of security companies. That is to say, perhaps they just want to create that feeling of lack of security so that they can offer the security services at high cost. So perhaps this could build an unnecessary need. And cyber jihadism, we are seeing it. Perhaps it will become relevant in the future, but so far, to date, is not an actual threat. Cyber jihadism understood as cyber terrorism, one of the pillars of cyber terrorism. That is to say, this one focuses on disseminating jihadism. So nowadays we have propaganda, defacement, denial of service. So nowadays they don't have enough capacity to have a cyber weapon to cause a significant harm or damage to an institution. What else can we say? Well, we've taken a look at the threat and at trends. And what can we do to reduce or limit cyber threats? Well, the only thing we can do is to implement security. What is the criteria that we follow? At the end of the day, it's not how much you spend on it, but just to shift from the physical world to the virtual world. For instance, with this card, you have to go through 20 controls to put your fingerprint, to go to your bank, to your workplace. We have to go through very many security filters. We have assumed that for the physical world, but we haven't assumed that for the virtual world. When you are using your computer, we don't assume that we have to use the same number of security filters that you use in the physical world. So every time I log on using my computer, I have to be aware that I have to follow a number of security measures. If we extrapolate the security measures that we adopt and that we implement on the physical world to the virtual world, we will be safer, we will be more secure. So it's a question of users becoming more and more aware. So we have to follow a number of procedures when it comes to using the internet. So you will have to have a number of procedures, follow them so that our practices are secure. What else? Well, this is that. So when you ask a security, heads of security about the problems that they detect in the organizations, the main problem, the main concern is that they have a shortage of qualified people or people skilled in with skills in security. So to implement security, you have to be well aware of very many technologies that requires updated knowledge, and it requires highly qualified personnel. So 37 of the personnel interviewed, they were not complaining about money or shortage of resources or financial resources. They were complaining about a shortage of qualified people. And they also complained about the lack of commitment and support from top management. Top management, up until they face a problem, they do not get down to fix it. So we give lots of awareness raising campaigns because we really want to make the top management aware that there is a problem that they may need, that they have to fix a problem, even if that hasn't had an impact on their bottom line. We want to make top management aware of that. We don't do that through a presentation of 5 hours. We just talk to them for an hour. We show them a demo of the potential damage. When we do those awareness raising meetings, top management increase the level of awareness. Then they talk to the managers and they either implement measures or allocate more resources to it. And then last, a lack of integration in security architecture. Well, sometimes security is applied in the last stage of projects. When you are designing a product or service, you have to think about security right from the start, right from the first phase of design. What else? Well, for us, sharing is essential. If we do not share, we will not be able to counteract threats. What we say here about trust, that is real. The added value of being here, of what we are sharing with you, is because we are sharing something that we see on a daily basis, and how to solve it, how to minimize it by sharing. And how do we share that? It's not a question of sharing randomly. What type of information we want to share? We want to share JARA rules, samples, patterns, sensitive information, all in all. Information that if were to be accessed by the attacker, they will know how much we know about them. So when we're talking about sharing information, we are talking about sharing information securely. So therefore, that information that is shared is safeguarded. So we are talking about small groups where we can talk freely and share this sensitive information freely, because you know that it will be handled securely. So if you've seen something, you done reverse engineering, you have your forensic, you have your pattern, you have JARA rules on that threat. If when you transfer, when you give it out, the other party that receives it does the same thing with you. So because we all have limited resources, we either do this type of exchange and this type of sharing, or we will not be getting anywhere. And we are doing that on a daily basis. And conclusions. Well, it is there. It is out there. At the end of the day, cyber threat is there, is present. It affects us all. We wrote down 600 incidents, 50 of them critical in nature, or 43 rather. This week, every week, we write a report for the vice president of the government. So that he knows what is happening in terms of cyber threat. 43 of them are critical. That means that we have evidence and proof of data infiltration. The problem exists. The problem is out there. How to mitigate it? Through two things: through awareness raising of top managers and of users, as I said before, and sharing, building trust in our partners. So this is a summary of my presentation. Ongoing increase in sophistication, number and complexity of cyber attacks. Cyber espionage has an impact on public administration and the strategic companies. The idea is for the public administration to be as secure as possible. If public administrations are secure, the citizens will be secure, as well as our economy. So this is one of our objectives. So we want public administration and companies with a strategic interest to be secure, so that they have early warning system, detection system, so that they are up to date in terms of counteracting threats. We also do auditing. We have an information plan for the administration. We also provide ad hoc information. We have lots of experience with our reverse engineering teams, forensics. So that's our added value. 10 years of experience. We've been working on that. We are not talking about reverse engineering of forensic analysis of malware code, which is just ordinary, like it's like minor. So we are not talking about spam only. We are talking about 8 or 10 years of experience working deeply with APTs. So difficulty of attribution. Well, we just wrote down a number of flags. Well, we have a problem. We have a problem. That's what is actually important. That's what is actually important about cyber threats. It is a problem. We have to be there. It exists there, and we have to put up enough barriers to mitigate the problem. Threats come from outside countries, from other countries, whether it is organizations or entities with good enough resources that allow them to do so. And here there are no friends, no allies. There are only shared interests. At a given point in time, I may be interested in partnering up with you, but if there is a geopolitical interest or whatever, I may not be interested in partnering up with you. That happens to us every day on a daily basis. Sometimes you want to protect the common good, sometimes the individual good. So here we cannot talk about friends or allies. It is also important the intelligence capacity. We should not forget, but we should set out security requirements. So we want those security requirements or measures to not to prevent the system from being fully operational. And if we do not do that, we will have someone in the company lowering the level of security of those security measures. So we need to find a balance between performance and security. And then we also have to strengthen our intelligence capacities. When you are handling 50,000 rules or million rules, you either have a data mining behind it or a huge big data capacity to treat that, to manage that information, or you will not get anywhere. You really need to have intelligence capacity to get to know the threat, to find out about the patterns, the interest, the purpose of it. But when it comes to pattern managing that patterns, it also requires significant intelligence. I am finishing now. So this is our 10 rules of security. So we have to work like if we were infected. That means that if we work in that fashion, we know that we have a problem and we want to create and implement the necessary security measures. That is to say, to be resilient. So putting up locks and latches. We want to make things happen, but we should not forget we just want to be resilient and to have response capacity. Well, this is with this I finish my presentation, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to take them. Thank you very much. Oh, there is a question there. Well, before you showed a graph with this year threat, 19,000. Is the what about the error margin? I mean, is the high number of them that are not detected where we don't have that margin, error margin? But yes, we are aware that there are many things that we do not detect. Well, you may notice that we also changed our CMs, our management systems to manage the incidents. We are improving them, we are adapting them. You see that in November the stats have remained stable. That's because we have changed our incident management systems. And answering your question, do we know what we are not seeing? No, actually no, but we are just improving our management system. We are more into quality and not that much into quantity. So we want to be more efficient in our management. Of course, we want to avoid false positives, and still we are getting a higher number of incidents. It is true to say that we have to assign resources. We have the resources that we are limited. If we had more resources, instead of detecting 19 incidents, we would be detecting or seeing 40 of them. So what we do is just we improve, and we learn so that that margin becomes smaller and smaller. But what is the error margin? I just don't know. Good morning. When you talk about sponsored attacks, not by states, but by governments, you talk about governments and countries that are strengthening the capacity to develop tools. Could you give us specific examples? Would you single out any? I cannot. Well, because this is sensitive information, and do not take it as an excuse. They are actually developing the capacity. We are monitoring them. We are seeing them. The type of capacities they are strengthening, developing, I just cannot say. And what we have shown on the screen is something that you may download from the internet. Many of those data came from, the source was Kaspersky. It is public information, what I've just shown you. But it is true that we have detected that those capacities those states are growing, increasing their capacity. And the same goes for any country. Well, we know that some countries have more weapons, more physical weapons, and now, in terms of cyberspace, well, all states will have offensive and defensive capacities. How much? Well, some of them didn't have any. They are just starting. Others who had them, they are just strengthening them. But I cannot be more specific in my answer. Another question there? All right, how feasible is international cooperation, bearing in mind that this entails conflict of interest with cyber intelligence, meaning that some countries surely will not want to disclose or to share information to other states for many reasons, because, well, some countries see the other country as a threat. Well, it is in real life. When you have a problem, when you have a disease, surely you will do everything at your hand to resolve it. Yes, and when countries have problem, we help out each other. There are mechanisms out there, and then yes, countries end up helping each other. So I cannot be more specific. We do it. We share information. We exchange information. We share the problem. So it is not that we've been doing this for 1,000 years. We've been improving. We've proven quite a lot recently, and we have these meetings where countries, entities have a problem, and we need to help each other. It is true. It is true what I'm saying, and there are mechanisms. Countries find a way to help each other. You need to build trust, but once you trust is built, we do it. It is part of our work, actually. Hello. Congratulations for your presentation. I know that there is a European directive that has just been recently passed, establishing collaboration between member states in terms of incidents, certs, etc. I know that in Spain there are very many certs, both regionally and nationally. Is there any kind of coordination between these emergency response teams? Yes, we're working on it. Well, I don't focus on that. When we talk about cybersecurity, I'm talking about early warning. We are talking about the different certs here and there. With regard to what you just said, transposition of the NIS directive, we are working on that. I'm actually involved in the working team for the transposition of it. We are working with the various relevant ministries. So that directive, as you very well said, establishes or help us strengthen coordination of the different stakeholders. So that directive will help us to set out our requirements, our competencies, and to establish coordination mechanisms. We're working on it. We are on it. So at this very point in time, we are developing it. And to tell you more, the deadline is the end of the year. We have to establish a single point of contact. Coordination, of course, we do have coordination. Well, as I said before, we have a vocation of service. We are demanding public administrations to be more secure, but public administrations are limited in resources. So we offer them these resources, web auditing. We offer you services through our portals. We give you a early warning system. I think out of the 19 communities, 15 have implemented the early warning system. There are only 3 autonomous communities, Valencia, Barcelona, and Andalusia. They have their own certs. What do we do with them? We do exchanging. We have a tool, ticketing for the exchange of technology. We are federating ourselves. That allows coordination between the two. I don't go into your cert, but I share the incidents that you have. We have implemented that with the Andalusian region. We are federated already. We will be doing that very soon in Valencia and also in Barcelona. We have contact with all our certs in Spain, And with regard to other competence, I'm talking about public sector, in cyber, CERCIT. Hopefully the directive needs will help us achieve specific measures with CERTIS and CIBE, etc. Because surely the NIST directive will clearly state that. Thank you very much, Pablo. A big applause for him. Thank you.